that was an awful result. I'm almost like too angry to make this video. Now, I feel like I've calmed down a little bit since writing the script initially, but man, this game was just so bad. I thought maybe for once we could have like a fun Leagues Cup run, go on and maybe at least like get a deep tournament run. I wasn't necessarily expecting to go on to win the whole thing. But no, the back line has to come back to bite us for the 50,000th time this year and the millionth time in an important elimination game in this club's history. So before we get into like getting angry about things and flaming people specifically, I do want to have an actual recap of the game and what happened. I'm going to follow like a similar path to my last video, but maybe make it a little bit more ranty because, God, there's just some stuff that really annoyed me in this game. So in this game, for the first like 40-ish minutes, it was kind of your average, like what your average American thinks of a soccer game, honestly, where there wasn't really too many big chances or anything, nothing really crazy going on. It was kind of just FCC dominating the possession, being the better team in the game, and just doing what they are expected to do. Like there was occasionally some plays where it's like, oh, if this pass had been a little bit better, it could have led to a goal eventually. But there weren't really any clear shots on goal for the first 40 minutes. I think there was one to Brian Ramirez from Evander that the Evander pass was a little bit long for him and it ended up going to the keeper. But if it had gotten to Ramirez's feet, probably would have been a goal. But that one, it wasn't like that crazy or anything like that. But yeah, they did maintain most of the possession in the first half. FC Cincinnati did. I was surprised to see that it was only like 60% towards the end of it, but it did feel like they kept the ball for long stretches of long stretches of the game, which was something that this team generally struggles to do and was nice to see from them. But then in the 44th minute, after a failed set piece off a corner, Evander gets the ball out wide at the top of the box and just scores another just world-class goal as he does. It did get tipped, I think, in the middle of it, but it was very good, just like getting like right at like the top left corner of the box, shoots it up, it lands like right over the keeper's head, just barely into the goal. Just a perfect finish from him, as he always does. And then heading out of halftime, like, I mean, I guess there was one like really good chance at the end of the half, like right after they scored, like Atlas just instantly turned the ball over. And I think it was Ramirez got it up the left side, and I think Kenji had a very clear shot on an open net that he pretty much could have scored, but he tried, like the keeper was running to the left side of the goal, and he tried to shoot it on the right, and there wasn't enough space to the right, so he ended up hitting it outside. Like he didn't necessarily know where he was on the field. That's just going to come with experience for him. He's a young player. I'm not too angry about it, but it did, like, it was a very clear opportunity that he should have scored. But then heading at a halftime after that, everything felt relatively the same. For about 30 minutes in the second half, FC Cincinnati was the dominant team in possession and actually had some more like clear chances on goal throughout the second half compared to how they did in the first. Just they were unable to finish. Like it felt like they were growing into the game, eventually going to score and make it 2-0, and then maybe stack some goals on top of each other and end up advancing because of the goal differential and stuff like that. But then at the 77th minute mark, Pat Noonan decided to send on his second sub window of the night. The first one wasn't super important. We'll talk about it later, though. But that sub window was Matt Miazga off for Teenage Hadebe and Kevin Denke off for Ayub Jabari, which, because of these subs, shifted around who was where in the back line. We initially had Giddy on the left, Miazga in the middle, and Miles on the right. Then kind of swapped everything around to have Hadebe on the left, then Miles in the middle, and Giddy on the right. So literally every slot changed where people ended up being. And it just completely fucked our backline and where our players were supposed to be and like where they thought they were supposed to be and stuff like that. And led to Atlas tying the game up legitimately 2 minutes later, beating Hadebe down the left side off a turnover from Echenike, and then just caught Miles Robinson flat-footed, just doing nothing in the middle of the box. And the shot hit off Loro's hands, like he spilled the save, which was terrible from him, and Atlas scores on the rebound, and it's 1-1. And I think this is where I want to rant a little bit about Miles Robinson, who is a designated player here for this team, one of the few designated player center backs that we've seen in MLS history, let alone just current day. And because, like, every single time he has to switch a position, whether it be from left to middle, left to right, right to middle to right, like whatever combination of moves you want to make, he always just does something terrible that usually leads to a goal, or just does something stupid, and usually that stupid thing leads to a goal in these games and is a big issue for this team. And this time, he just decided he didn't want to cover the guy standing in the middle of the field. And that just effectively straight up led to the goal. Like, he was just standing there, not trying to do, like, not covering anybody, not doing anything. And there was just a guy wide open in the middle where he is supposed to be playing. And that was just awful. And then 5 minutes later in the game, Hadebe gets beat down the left side again, which, to be fair, he didn't have too much support down the left from the wingbacks, but it still wasn't great. It ends up crossing over the middle of the field. Our midfield barely makes an attempt to actually get the ball because it does land at an Atlas player, but like after that he's just able to like easily dribble around Buka. I think Buka like dropped in the middle from the right wing back spot, and Dotto, I believe, was also there, and neither of them were like super confident going in for a tackle at any point. And it was like right around the top of the box too. It wasn't like it was in the penalty area or anything like that. And the Atlas player is just easily able to dribble around them, and then gets it out to a guy on the FC Cincinnati like right side of the field where Giddy's supposed to be, and he's just standing there doing nothing because he doesn't like remember where he's supposed to be because he was playing on the left side the entire game. And that player just gets the ball, who I think he was on for like 1 minute, and he had been added to the Leagues Cup roster yesterday for the Atlas team, I think they mentioned on the broadcast. And Loro spills it again, and I believe the same player scores it on the rebound, which just was infuriating to watch. Like it was really bad. Miles, that goal wasn't really on him, but he also wasn't really doing anything in the middle of the field. It was mostly on Pat Noonan for the substitutions in that stretch of the game in like the 77th minute mark. That sub window was horrifically bad. And I think we'll talk about some parts of it that maybe aren't necessarily Noonan's fault because like of the situation with the back line and the roster and stuff like that. But I do want to talk about the rest of this game first, even though I honestly don't really feel like talking about the final 10 minutes of this game, because yeah, there was like an on-field decision for a penalty, which was one of the worst calls I've ever seen in my life, and it got overturned luckily. And like, I mean, not luckily, obviously I wanted it to be a penalty and for FC Cincinnati and to get tied in the game to get tied up, but it was the wrong call objectively, and it was overturned, and that was that. And that was pretty much the game. It went on for a couple more minutes with like, I think there was a decent chance for Barlow towards the end of the game that maybe he could have scored, but it was a really nice save by the Atlas keeper. And that was effectively it after that. And I don't know. But before I go into talking about some of the individual performances and like specifics with the game, I do want to talk about the table here, which was here. And what this means for FC Cincinnati overall. I do want to refresh on the table here. So basically what they are going to need is they're going to need Austin to lose, Chicago to lose, Charlotte to lose, Dallas to lose, and LAFC to lose in this. And I believe you have Minnesota to lose as well. But never mind. Minnesota just played their third game, so that doesn't matter. But they're basically going to need a lot of teams to lose all in a row, which is not very likely if they want to get into this top four. They would need to finish in goal differential over Austin and Chicago. Oh, so they basically need Austin and Chicago to lose. Austin would need to lose by multiple goals, and it would have to be them and Charlotte in the third and the fourth spots, and then everybody else below them that could potentially jump them to also lose and be of lower goal differential than them. So yeah, it's not an ideal scenario. You're not looking at a very likely Leagues Cup like playoff berth for this team, but it's possible. Maybe at the time of recording this, I'll probably post this tonight, so you'll see this whenever. I'm recording this at like 11:24. So Salt Lake's about to win 3-0, and they're going to be pretty solid to move on, unless Austin and Chicago win and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just not great for Cincinnati. They are probably eliminated from Leagues Cup. So I do want to talk about the lineup. I actually don't remember if I brought a tab up, so we'll just scroll down here. Wow, okay, they post a lot of stuff. Where we'll talk player by player here, which I think we'll start with Kevin Denke, this was probably his worst game recently. He wasn't like horrible, but did pretty much nothing in this game. Like he was pretty much a non-factor in this game. Then you had Kenji, who was solid, as he's been for pretty much the entire year when he has played outside of the Columbus game. He also didn't do a ton, but was definitely better than Denke in this game and was a little bit more involved outside of. He was better than Denke because he actually was able to get into spots to score, like that spot at the end of the first half that I mentioned. Obi, I thought was awesome in the midfield. I just skipped over Evander, but we'll talk about the other midfielders first, I guess. But Obi, I think, was this team's best player in this game. Honestly, he was awesome, as he's been for a lot of this year since coming back from injury. Honestly, his contract isn't great overall, but I think he's a very, very good player in the midfield here, and clearly leads like a lot of like the pressing structure and how this team is able to just kind of press without the ball and stuff like that. And he's been very good with that. I think he's also been a lot better on the ball this year. He's been a little worse, like going back and defending around like the top of the box and stuff like that, but he's still a very nice piece here. And I really, really have enjoyed watching him here these past few weeks specifically. I think he's been one of this team's best players in that stretch. Then you also have Dotto, who's very good, I think, especially going forward, making a lot of nice runs into the box and leading, or like having that lead to a lot of solid chances in the first half specifically. I think he could have been a bit better on defense, but I feel like most of the issues were with the back line there in defense rather than with him necessarily. And then Evander, I thought was great. He was the engine of the attack for the night. He could have done maybe a little bit more. He had some maybe like small chances that I would have liked to see maybe him do something slightly different on, but it wasn't like too bad. And then he also like just basically scored the one goal on his own. So I don't have any issue with how Evander played tonight, and he was very good in this game. And then we'll get into, I mean, honestly, Brian Ramirez, I thought continued to look very good at left wing back. He was great when he played in this game. He did get subbed off later. We'll mention that in a bit. Buka, I think, probably played his worst game at right wing back in this game, but I think that was mostly because he wasn't massively involved, because it did seem like a lot of FCC's game plan was to attack down their left wing with Brian Ramirez because the guy on Atlas just could not defend that area of the field. And he was basically like a traffic cone out there off the ball, so that was like a lot of how FCC's chances were like materializing and stuff like that. But Atlas did a good job like kind of making up for that a little bit in defense a lot of the time until the goal, obviously. And that was good. So and then for Buka, like he didn't really do much honestly in this game. Like he was kind of just cutting inside a lot, being like a actual midfielder a lot of the time, and having Kenji drop back, Dotto go up a little bit, or Evander go up a little bit, and like kind of moving that area of the field around and cycling those players to make it hard to track, which Buka has done a good job with, and I think this team has done a very good job with kind of figuring out a little bit more of their attacking structure and stuff like that, letting Dotto make deep runs, Kenji drop a little bit, Buka move up, and then on the other side you have Brian Ramirez like kind of being generally in one spot, but sometimes making a run, Giddy making deeper runs, having Obi drop back to fill his space, Denke can drop down, go out wide, stuff like that. Like, I think this overall structure, like without the back line, I think has been very good, and is a big piece of why this team actually had a chance to make it through in this tournament. But then we're going to move on to talking about the back line, where we'll start with Matt Miazga. I think he looked solid when in the game, I think. Probably his best game that he's played all year in the, 77 minutes that he played. But he clearly cannot play a full 90 minutes anymore. He gets subbed out every game. I don't know why he's starting here, honestly. Because like it's completely hampering our backline because of what I've already talked about in this video with the rotations, where Miazga can only play in the middle. So when he gets subbed out and you're putting on Teenage Hadebe, Andre Chirilla, even like Nick Hagland, like those guys don't really play in the middle, or Smith or Powell as well. Like none of those guys really play in the middle of a back three. Miles Robinson's the only other guy here that does that. So he's going to have to shift to the middle a lot of the time. And again, that's going to shift a lot of things around. And then Giddy's going to have to shift as well if you're bringing in a left-footed center back. It doesn't make a lot of sense here to have Matt Miazga starting, or even on this team, to be honest. Because like if you're starting with Robinson in the middle, and then you have like let's say, Giddy on the right, Chirilla on the left, like they did in the last game, and you're subbing Miazga on in the middle of the game, are you subbing him on for Chirilla? Are you subbing him on for Robinson, who is, like, when he's playing his one position the entire game, he is pretty good, especially when he's in the middle. I think that's where he's played his best soccer this year. And I think that's where he would continue to play the best the rest of the year. But I think also Matt Miazga's a better communicator than Robinson. Like, it's really, like, it's whatever overall with him. I don't really like. I don't know. It's really weird because Miazga hasn't been that good, but he played well in this game. But him not being able to play in 90 minutes fucked us in this game. And I think that's a really weird spot to be. And I think it probably will lead to Matt Miazga not being on this team come the end of the transfer window, or Miles Robinson not being on this team at the end of the transfer window. I think it should be one or the other. I would prefer it to be Robinson, but I highly doubt any team's going to come and sign him for like the contract that he's on. I don't think this team is going to buy him out because of the contract that he's on. I think Matt Miazga is much more likely to go either way with that, honestly. And then obviously we talked a little bit about Miles, but he just continues to be an awful contract for this team. He was okay for the first 75, but did have some really weird moments even in that 75 minutes. Just kind of playing center back how I would play it on FIFA, like constantly making like really irresponsible runs forward that even Giddy, who's a converted midfielder, doesn't make. And like Giddy was solid in this game, I think. Again, outside of that final 15 minutes, he was very good in this game as well, making a lot of nice runs forward to help that backline, which was more of what he is supposed to do rather than Robinson, who's supposed to be a center back on this team. So it's overall just not great from this back line. I think Giddy is a fine piece, and I would actually be okay if he continues to play there, especially for the attack. He's generally really, really solid in that kind of progressing the ball kind of section of his game. And then I think the other two need to make some changes there, some kind of change, whether it be somebody coming in, somebody like having a different set of starters, whether it be Andre Chirilla coming in. I would very much like that. Like just Chirilla in for Miazga, Giddy playing on the right, Robinson in the middle, Chirilla on the left, and then you could maybe bring in a different guy to play left center back that can swap out in and out with Chirilla and be very good there. I think that would be a very good way to even just make this a little bit more solid of a backline that you don't have to rely on players being able to swap positions in the backline in the middle of the game. And then Loro, I thought for the first 75 minutes looked really good in this game, but as mentioned before when talking about the actual game, was pretty much at fault for those 2 goals late because he should have been able to hold on to those shots and kind of not spill them, which then would have led to the goal. Like he should have saved both of them, realistically. I talked about him being the starting keeper in the last video, but I really don't know about that now. It's really just on edge. I think he played a great tournament for most of the tournament, but in that final 15 minutes, he pretty much cost them. So I still wouldn't mind seeing him as the keeper in their next game, honestly, over Roman Celentano, who has also been pretty bad this year. But I really don't see how you can't go back to Roman at this point, who, like, Roman hasn't been terrible this year, but, like, he still isn't a great distributor of the ball compared to Loro, who's much, much better at that. And his shot-stopping ability hasn't really been that good. He's not been that confident to come off his line and get past, and, like, catch, like, off, like, set pieces and stuff, which has been part of the bad set piece defending for this team. I don't think Loro's been massively better at that. I think he's probably been even a little bit worse at that overall in terms of just like saving, like his pure like shot stopping ability. But I do think like even with the shot stopping ability being like a touch worse just overall, I think the distribution is so much better that I think you could realistically have Loro be the keeper of this team for at least a few games to come out of the Leagues Cup break. And then I do want to talk about the subs here, where you had Ender Echenike and Tom Barlow come in for Brian Ramirez and Kenji Bobadem in the first window, I believe around the 65th minute or something like that. Ender, I think, had his worst game in a while, having a few like turnovers in not ideal spots, but he wasn't awful. I did expect a lot better, as mentioned before, with like how bad Atlas's defense was down their right side and FCC's left side. I expected Ender to be a lot better in that spot. I thought his fresh legs and his speed would be really nice to expose that kind of area of the field, but it wasn't really that great. And I think it looked even better for FCC when Ramirez was in the game, which wasn't great to see for Ender, but he wasn't awful in this game overall, but he could have been a lot better. And then Barlow, I think he was a nice addition into the game for Kenji. He had a chance like late in this game that probably should have gone in, but he wasn't able to finish. And it was a really nice save by the Atlas keeper, but it wasn't even with that attempt at the save, Barlow probably still should have scored, but it was a little unlucky for him, I will say. So I'm not going to levy too much criticism his way again, because it was one moment in the game that they still should have won regardless of that. So yeah, Barlow had a decent game, and then Hadebe, we already talked about, was awful, came in the 77th. Jabari also came into the 77th for Kevin Denke. And I think he, as always, had some nice moments in the box, just as really nice player to just kind of send a ball into, and he's always going to go up and be able to kind of dictate where it goes after that. But it kind of overall, like, I just kind of had the feeling like I would just rather have Kevin Denke in the game right now. Maybe you could say, okay, Jabari instead of Barlow, and I think that actually would have been nice, like to see Denke and Jabari be the first two, like instead of Denke and Barlow, and then Denke getting subbed off later. Like I would have liked to see that a little bit more. Maybe get a sub in the midfield for Anunga, for Dotto or something like that, if they wanted to play a little bit more defensive overall, but just not the case there. And then the final note here for players and stuff like that was Christian Fletcher made his debut here. He played like 5 minutes in this game after they allowed the second goal. But I think he showed some nice stuff overall in the limited time that he got, and I think he could be some nice depth on the left wing or even maybe at striker. Like he's been a player that I think has been very interesting. Like a guy that had a lot of potential but was injured for most of the year so far, and I would be curious to see how he continues to play out. So where does this leave this team? I do want to give some final thoughts here. I didn't really write too much down for this because there wasn't really too much nice things I had to say. Like I don't think there's anything too positive to come out of with this game other than maybe some nice individual performances. Because Pat Noonan continues to make just terrible decisions in big games with substitutions, and just the roster isn't getting fixed for whatever reason. I believe there was a rumor that FC Cincinnati was tied to some, I don't remember where he's from for the life of me, but some center back. He was worth like $3 million. So they're clearly looking for guys, but we haven't seen too much on that front. And then I believe I talked about Brenner in the last video and the rumors there. Denke, I believe there were more rumors that came out today about, Denke potentially getting a transfer to Hull City, which personally I think that would be really cool, like a cool place for him to go. Me personally, I don't watch too much Prem football and stuff like that, but if he went there, I would probably watch Hull City games and stuff like that because I do really like Kevin Denke, and that would be very interesting to see there. I would like that. And it would be like a $23 million move, which would be really good for this team. But what I talked about in the last video was potentially Brenner coming in to replace him. And Brenner now has a foot injury that could leave him sidelined for at least 45 days, which would not be ideal. Like this team without Kevin Denke, I don't think it would be like a complete disaster not having Kevin Denke here, honestly. But I do think it would be a pretty big difference not having him there, because I think teams would have to account for Kenji and Bomadem a little bit more, and that would probably make him play worse. I don't think Tom Barlow and Ayub Jabari, I don't think those guys would be able to kind of fill in there unless they're super confident in what they're seeing from Christian Fletcher, or maybe what Echenike could give them at striker, or what Dotto could give them at striker. Like, I really don't see that happening without a striker coming in. Like, I don't think Denke is leaving without another guy coming in this window. But I would have some questions about how that would work when... No, not how that would work, but like how... like who would come in to replace Denke. Like, I don't really know. And I would have some questions about whether or not they'd be able to get a deal done, because we've seen in past like summer transfer windows, like in 2024, where they just weren't able to get a deal done right at the deadline, and they had to go and basically give a DP deal to just some random, like I think it was Nico Gioacchini, who I had never heard of before. Obviously, I mean, to be fair, I don't pay that much attention to world football anyway, so it's not like too crazy. But yeah, that one was a bad deal, and I'm a little afraid that if they do sell Denke at that $23 million mark, that there would be a situation similar to that. But also, like, I trust this front office enough to get a deal done, like, or at least sell Denke when they have another guy lined up to buy immediately after that. So, um, yeah, I don't really think there's too much else to say here. Just a terrible result that like Pat Noonan chokes again, like the millionth important game that he's choked for this team. And I'm starting to get there on the Noonan out kind of stuff. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below, as always, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.